Sunrise at Hartsfield, Jackson Atlanta International Airport was always magical. Shafts of golden light pierced through vast expanses of polished glass, casting gentle patterns onto the bustling terminal floors. There was poetry in this constant motion, thousands of lives converging, intersecting, then parting ways again, each individual carrying stories of dreams, ambitions, reunions, or farewells. Amid this daily symphony, Danielle Carter stood quietly, her observant eyes gently scanning the horizon of humanity before her. This was Danielle's first morning at the airport, not as a passenger, but as the newly appointed head of airport security. Her crisp navy blue suit exuded professionalism, and yet, beneath her poised exterior, she felt a flutter of anticipation. Danielle had spent over a decade safeguarding travelers at New York's JFK Airport, yet even that vast experience hadn't fully prepared her for the magnitude of responsibility here, at the busiest airport in the world. She had chosen to walk anonymously through the terminals this morning, savoring the rare chance to understand the environment from the passenger's perspective. As she stood before the expansive departure board, Danielle found herself momentarily lost in the sheer scale of operations. Flights flashed on the screens above: London, Dubai, Tokyo, reminders of how interconnected and yet so profoundly complex her task would be. The responsibility weighed heavy, but it was precisely this challenge that had drawn her here. A chance to not just protect, but also elevate the dignity and respect afforded to each traveler. Her thoughtful reverie was abruptly interrupted by a firm voice from behind. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm going to need to see your ID." Danielle turned calmly to face Officer Jason Miller, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s whose stern gaze seemed sharpened by years of scrutinizing strangers. His presence was authoritative yet tinged with an undertone of suspicion that Danielle immediately recognized from her long career in airport security. She offered a composed smile and reached deliberately into her handbag, retrieving her identification card. "Of course, officer. Is there a concern?" Officer Miller briefly glanced at her ID before looking back at her, suspicion undiminished. "You seem to be lingering here without luggage or an immediate destination." "Random security check, standard procedure," he replied briskly, without warmth. Danielle remained calm, sensing immediately that this was far from random. Having trained hundreds of security officers herself, she understood how easily biases could slip unnoticed into protocol. Yet she decided against revealing her identity immediately, instead choosing to see how far this encounter would reveal deeper institutional issues. "Actually, I'm just taking it all in," Danielle responded gently, gesturing toward the bustling terminal. "I find airports fascinating." Miller appeared unmoved, clearly unconvinced. "Fascinating or not, we must maintain vigilance," he replied, the edge in his voice suggesting more than just professional diligence. Danielle maintained eye contact, neither confrontational nor submissive. She recognized something troubling beneath the officer's firm exterior, a deep-seated assumption, an unspoken prejudice. But instead of anger, Danielle felt sadness. After all the years, the training, and the conversations about fairness, moments like these were stark reminders of how much work remained undone. As Miller handed back her ID, his dismissive nod was perfunctory. "You're free to go." Danielle politely thanked him and moved on, her mind replaying the encounter. She was no stranger to subtle profiling. Being a woman of color in high-level security positions had exposed her to numerous challenges, but each experience still stung uniquely. Yet instead of dwelling on the sting, Danielle consciously reframed the incident into a valuable insight. She had just uncovered her first critical challenge at Hartsfield-Jackson. Continuing slowly through the terminal, Danielle's attention shifted inward. This wasn't just about one officer or one incident. It spoke volumes about the hidden dynamics at play. If an officer so openly profiled her, how many others, travelers without her professional standing, had experienced far worse? How many felt their dignity stripped away during these interactions? Danielle resolved then and there that under her watch, this airport would prioritize dignity and fairness just as highly as it did security and efficiency. She paused again briefly, observing families checking in, luggage, business travelers rushing past, and elderly passengers gently assisted by airport staff. Danielle felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her role was not merely about detecting threats, it was about reshaping an environment so critical to human interaction and dignity. Meanwhile, Officer Miller returned to his station, vaguely troubled. Something about Danielle had unsettled him. He couldn't place it exactly. Perhaps it was her composed confidence or the quiet authority in her voice. Miller had built his career on instincts, honed by years of experience. Yet today, his gut felt strangely off-kilter. He dismissed his uncertainty quickly, reassuring himself that he had acted within his authority, a necessary vigilance in a world of constant threat. But deep within, a seed of doubt took root. Back in the terminal, Danielle continued her careful observations, noting interactions between officers and passengers, subtle but critical points of friction and grace. Her mind began formulating strategies, new training modules emphasizing empathy, clearer accountability measures, and above all, open dialogues confronting biases head on. Change, Danielle knew, required courage to address uncomfortable truths. Eventually, Danielle made her way toward the administrative wing. Before stepping onto the elevator, she glanced once more over her shoulder, taking in the vast terminal. The morning sun had climbed higher, illuminating the intricate dance of human movement and interaction. She felt both humbled and motivated, aware of the daunting responsibility, yet profoundly determined to meet it head-on. Arriving at the administrative offices, Danielle met briefly with Director Caldwell. He welcomed her warmly, discussing initial expectations and priorities. Yet, even as she listened attentively, Danielle's thoughts drifted back to Officer Miller. She knew their paths would soon cross again, and this encounter would shape much more than a single relationship. It would help define the soul of the security culture at Hartsfield-Jackson. By the time Danielle settled into her new office, unpacking photos and personal items that reminded her of home, she felt a strong sense of clarity. Her first day had already illuminated the magnitude of her mission. Security was not just about procedures or threat assessments. It was profoundly about human respect, fairness, and understanding. She took out her notebook, thoughtfully, jotting down observations from the morning. Officer Miller's name appeared clearly, not out of resentment, but out of intention. Danielle believed strongly in personal growth, in the ability of each individual, including Miller, to confront biases, learn, and change. As difficult as this encounter had been, Danielle also saw it as an opportunity, perhaps even a catalyst for genuine transformation. Outside her window, planes climbed gracefully into the sky, heading toward countless destinations. Danielle paused, reflecting briefly on how journeys, whether of airplanes or personal growth, always required courage. She had taken this position knowing challenges lay ahead, yet also confident that through empathy, leadership, and determination, positive change was possible. In her quiet reflection, Danielle recalled her own beginnings in aviation security, those moments when someone believed in her potential, giving her strength to persevere despite setbacks and prejudices. Now she stood in a position to offer the same faith to others, to foster a culture built on fairness and mutual respect. As morning gave way to midday, Danielle felt her resolve strengthen. Yes, her encounter with Officer Miller had been challenging, even unsettling, yet it had also been invaluable, highlighting precisely why she was here, why her role mattered deeply. Danielle rose slowly, adjusting her blazer as she prepared for her first formal meeting with the security team. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. Each step, even the uncomfortable ones, would lead toward growth, dignity, and a more humane approach to security. After all, in a place where so many journeys began and ended, the greatest transformation of all could well begin today, right here, in the unexpected encounters that challenged assumptions and opened hearts. Taking a deep breath, Danielle stepped confidently forward, determined to lead by example, embodying the very fairness and compassion she intended to instill in others. It was only day one, but already she knew her work had truly begun. Officer Jason Miller adjusted his posture, straightening the collar of his uniform, and exhaled deeply. Standing at his usual checkpoint inside Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, he glanced across the bustling concourse. To outsiders, Miller was the image of authority, steady, vigilant, and confident. Yet today, beneath the calm facade, anxiety churned within him, gnawing persistently at the corners of his consciousness. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling left by the morning's encounter with the woman at the departures board, Danielle Carter. The name still rang clearly in his memory, along with the poised manner in which she had calmly presented her ID, even when subjected to his intense scrutiny. Miller had always trusted his instincts, confident that his ability to gauge threats had kept thousands of travelers safe over 15 long years. But in this particular case, his instincts had misfired badly, casting him in a moment of discomfort he wasn't accustomed to. His mind drifted involuntarily back to the meeting earlier in the morning when the airport's director, Mr. Caldwell, introduced Danielle as the new head of airport security. Jason's heart had sunk at the revelation, and humiliation surged through him when their eyes briefly met. Danielle had offered no rebuke, no trace of bitterness, only a knowing, thoughtful expression that somehow unsettled him even more deeply. The subtle complexities of that moment continued to trouble him. He had never consciously seen himself as someone prejudiced or unfair. If anything, Miller considered himself a protector, someone willing to go beyond comfort to ensure public safety. But Danielle's quiet dignity, her measured reaction to his unnecessary interrogation, exposed a hidden bias he'd long refused to acknowledge. Now, alone at his station, Jason was forced to confront questions he'd spent years avoiding. Had he allowed stereotypes to cloud his judgment? Had power and authority warped his sense of fairness? Yet, there was more to Jason Miller than his imposing figure and stern demeanor. Away from the airport's sterile corridors, Jason was simply a father, raising two teenage daughters alone. Widowed at a relatively young age, he'd built his life around routines that kept both grief and loneliness at bay. Uniformed authority became his shield, his identity, a role that had given him purpose and respect. At home, however, life was different, gentler, more vulnerable. His daughters, Emily and Chloe, saw a side of him no passenger ever would: a father cooking breakfast, helping with homework, attending dance recitals, and comforting nightmares. He worked tirelessly, not merely to enforce security, but to build stability for his family, seeking safety and order as a remedy for the chaos he'd faced in his personal life. But recently, Jason had sensed a distance forming with Emily, his eldest daughter. At 16, she had started asking difficult questions about fairness and injustice, reflecting conversations she had at school or had encountered online. When Jason brushed aside these topics, she withdrew, disappointed by his unwillingness to engage honestly. He hated the silence that had grown between them, yet pride and discomfort prevented him from bridging it. Today's encounter with Danielle stirred those buried anxieties again, amplifying the emotional dissonance he felt. She embodied the very integrity and fairness that Emily so passionately defended, qualities he had always admired yet somehow failed to fully practice himself. Jason shook off his introspection abruptly, his attention snapping back to the checkpoint line. Passengers moved through, eyes on phones, bags on shoulders, each face a brief flicker in his watchful awareness. A young African-American man approached the scanner, eyes nervously darting around, gripping a backpack tightly. Jason immediately felt a familiar tension rise in him, his habitual suspicion surfacing. But before stepping forward, he paused, suddenly aware of the gravity behind his impulses. He hesitated. Was he acting out of genuine suspicion, or was this reflex shaped by years of unchecked bias? The question itself made him uncomfortable. Taking a measured breath, Jason allowed the passenger to pass without interference. He felt uneasy, vulnerable, yet strangely lighter, as though some internal chain had loosened slightly. During a brief lull, Miller stole a glance toward the administrative offices, where Danielle's presence was beginning to influence security operations. Word was quickly spreading about the new protocols she planned to implement: data-driven processes, sensitivity training, open dialogues addressing implicit bias. Jason bristled instinctively at these changes, seeing them as unnecessary interference. Yet deep down, he recognized a quiet wisdom in her approach, something genuine that resonated painfully with his private doubts. His radio crackled softly, pulling him from his thoughts. A familiar voice, Officer Laura Simmons, checked in from another concourse. Laura had known Jason for years, respecting him, yet occasionally challenging his methods. Today, sensing his distraction, she asked cautiously, "Jason, everything all right over there?" "Fine," he responded, sharper than intended, realizing how transparent his agitation had become. Laura paused a moment before softly adding, "Change can be tough, but maybe some good will come from it." Jason didn't reply, her words landing heavily upon him. Laura's quiet honesty added another layer to the uncertainty building inside him. Could change truly bring good? Could he adapt after so many years? He hated admitting vulnerability, yet her words lingered. The rest of the shift passed slowly, Jason performing his duties mechanically while lost in thought. When evening finally arrived, he left the airport feeling unusually drained. Driving home beneath the fading sunlight, his thoughts returned to Danielle again, not in resentment but in reluctant admiration. Her calm strength and clear convictions had unsettled him precisely because they illuminated his own shortcomings. That night, Jason found himself awake long after his daughters had gone to bed. Sitting quietly at the kitchen table, a dim lamp casting shadows on familiar photographs of happier days, he reflected on what truly lay behind his badge: a complicated man navigating grief, fear, pride, and insecurity. His job was supposed to be about safeguarding others, yet now he realized that protection wasn't enough without fairness and empathy. In the quiet darkness, Jason began to sense the possibility of something better, not only for the airport or his career, but for himself and his family. Emily's face came to his mind again, her disappointment fresh and piercing. Could this moment, uncomfortable as it was, become the catalyst for healing, growth, and reconciliation? Could he become someone his daughters could genuinely respect? Not for his uniform, but for his character? Jason felt tears sting his eyes, a surprising and unsettling emotion. Yet, for the first time in years, he didn't fight it. He allowed himself to feel the full weight of this reckoning, painful yet necessary. Tomorrow would be difficult. Facing Danielle and the new culture she embodied would challenge him deeply. But maybe, Jason considered quietly, this challenge was exactly what he needed. He stood slowly, turning off the kitchen lamp, stepping softly upstairs to check on Emily and Chloe, asleep peacefully in their rooms. Watching them in the stillness, he made a silent promise. He would confront this internal struggle honestly, willing to learn, willing to change. Behind the badge was more than authority or pride. There was a man still capable of humility and growth, someone determined to regain the trust he'd unknowingly forfeited. And as Officer Jason Miller finally drifted into sleep, the airport miles away quiet under midnight stars, he carried within him the fragile but powerful hope that tomorrow's challenge could lead not to defeat, but toward redemption. The morning sky above Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was cloaked in clouds, casting an uncertain gray pall over the vast terminals below. Danielle Carter moved quietly through Concourse D, her steps unhurried but deliberate, as she quietly observed the seamless rhythm of travelers flowing to and from their gates. It had become part of her daily routine, walking these halls not simply as a supervisor, but as an empathetic observer, deeply attuned to the invisible struggles beneath the surface. Her thoughts lately had often drifted back to Officer Jason Miller, reflecting on their difficult first encounter, as well as his journey toward recognizing his hidden biases. Danielle saw potential in every individual, potential not only for growth, but for genuine transformation. Yet today, a vague sense of tension lingered. Perhaps it was the overcast sky, or an intuition built from years in security leadership. But Danielle felt alert, as if anticipating a defining moment she couldn't yet fully see. A short distance ahead stood Jason Miller himself, his posture rigid, his demeanor radiating an unmistakable unease. Jason had begun his shift feeling conflicted, haunted by recent revelations about himself and the confrontation of his own deep-seated prejudices. Despite genuine efforts toward self-awareness, old instincts remained stubbornly ingrained, tempting him into familiar, misguided patterns. As Jason monitored the crowd, his eyes settled on Marcus Ellis, a young African-American businessman making his way quickly toward wide Gate D12, clutching his boarding pass and passport. Marcus moved hurriedly but politely, focused intently on catching his imminent flight. Unconsciously, Jason's attention sharpened. His instincts, flawed yet stubborn, pushed him toward suspicion, activating those old ingrained fears. Before he fully understood his actions, Jason found himself stepping forward, raising a hand authoritatively toward Marcus. "Excuse me, sir. Step over here. I need to see your identification." Marcus stopped abruptly, startled and visibly concerned. "I'm running late for my flight," he responded respectfully, presenting his boarding pass and ID without resistance. "Is there a problem?" Jason hesitated briefly, feeling an uncomfortable internal tug of war, an emerging awareness of wrongdoing battling with habitual authority. His uncertainty manifested as impatience. "Routine check," he snapped, maintaining a tone unnecessarily harsh. "Open your bag, please." Passengers around them began noticing the tension, some slowing their pace to observe cautiously. Marcus, nervous yet compliant, opened his small suitcase swiftly, displaying neatly folded clothing, business documents, and personal items, nothing out of the ordinary. Jason, driven now purely by stubborn pride rather than genuine suspicion, continued rifling through Marcus's belongings, drawing further attention and murmurs from the gathering crowd. Humiliation darkened Marcus's expression, his quiet dignity clashing starkly with Jason's intrusive approach. Observing from afar, Danielle felt a sudden, deep sorrow. Her heart sank at seeing Jason relapse into harmful behaviors they'd worked hard to address, causing humiliation to another innocent passenger. She moved swiftly toward the scene, her mind racing to balance professionalism with compassion, authority with empathy. "Officer Miller," Danielle spoke calmly, her voice clear and steady but devoid of hostility. "What seems to be the concern?" Jason straightened quickly, the shame of being caught in the act evident on his face. He turned toward Danielle, trying unsuccessfully to hide his defensiveness behind a thin veneer of authority. "Just a random check," he answered uneasily. Danielle glanced thoughtfully at Marcus, who met her gaze with embarrassed gratitude, sensing her sincerity. "Sir," she said gently to Marcus, "I apologize for the inconvenience. You're free to go. Safe travels." Marcus nodded appreciatively, closing his suitcase swiftly, and hurried toward his gate, desperate not to miss his flight. Turning her attention fully to Jason now, Danielle maintained a composed yet deeply compassionate tone. "Jason, let's step aside for a moment." They walked quietly toward an isolated corridor, away from prying eyes and whispered commentary. For several moments, neither spoke, the silence heavy yet meaningful. Danielle chose her words with great care. "You know," she began softly, looking him directly in the eyes, "our work is meant to protect, not humiliate or marginalize." Jason looked away, frustration and guilt mixing painfully within him. "I don't understand myself sometimes," he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. "I thought I'd move past this." Danielle's expression softened further. She saw not only the officer before her, but also the human being struggling with internal demons that years of ingrained biases had fed. Her next words were not of reprimand, but of genuine empathy. "Change isn't linear, Jason. It's never simple. But recognizing these moments as opportunities is crucial. Each encounter teaches us something." He glanced back at her, anguish evident in his eyes. "But I've hurt people, Danielle. Real people. Today was unnecessary. I let pride and fear control me." "Yes, you did," Danielle acknowledged honestly but gently. "But admitting it now is the first step towards something better. True courage isn't in never making mistakes. It's in facing them head on, growing through them." Jason's shoulders relaxed slightly, his defenses beginning to crumble beneath the weight of her sincerity. "How do I change something that's been part of me for so long?" he asked quietly, vulnerable in a way he had never allowed himself to be before. Danielle considered her response carefully. "By consciously challenging your perceptions every day, by questioning your assumptions before they guide your actions, and most importantly, by choosing empathy over suspicion, humanity over authority." They stood quietly, each absorbing the profound truth of this exchange. Danielle could sense Jason's turmoil shifting slowly toward acceptance, toward an understanding that genuine transformation required patience, humility, and constant vigilance against old patterns. "Listen," she continued, her voice gentle yet firm. "You can't undo past actions, but you can choose differently moving forward. I'm committed to supporting your growth, but accountability must follow mistakes. We'll need to address this officially." Jason nodded solemnly, understanding fully the gravity of his actions. He accepted her statement without resistance, knowing consequences were necessary and just. His journey toward change, he now realized, had truly begun, not comfortably, not easily, but authentically. Later that afternoon, Danielle sat quietly in her office, documenting the incident with fairness and careful detail. Her heart felt heavy, yet hopeful. Leadership, she reflected, wasn't merely discipline. It required fostering genuine understanding, guiding others through painful but necessary growth. She saw clearly now that today's turning point wasn't simply Jason's, it was her own as well, reaffirming her belief in empathy, compassion, and accountability. As Danielle completed her report, a gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door revealed Marcus Ellis, standing quietly, his demeanor thoughtful yet calm. "I just wanted to thank you," Marcus said earnestly, genuine gratitude in his voice. "Your kindness made a painful moment bearable. I felt seen, respected." His words moved Danielle deeply, affirming the profound responsibility she carried every day. "Thank you for coming by," she responded sincerely. "Your experience matters. It will help us do better." Marcus nodded appreciatively, leaving quietly yet carrying away a renewed sense of dignity. Danielle returned slowly to her desk, feeling strengthened by his words. reassured that genuine humanity remained at the core of her mission. Outside her window, the cloudy skies gradually began to clear, sunlight breaking through the heavy cover, illuminating the airport's vast expanse. Danielle reflected quietly on the symbolic beauty of this shift, from darkness to clarity, from conflict toward genuine healing. Today had indeed been a turning point, a difficult yet necessary one. It revealed pain but also potential, flaws but also strength. For Danielle, it reinforced her belief that even the most entrenched biases could be confronted with courage, empathy, and a steadfast commitment to fairness. As the afternoon deepened, Danielle rose slowly, adjusting her blazer gently, her resolve unwavering. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, yet she felt profoundly confident in the value of her mission. Together with her team, through compassion and clarity, she believed wholeheartedly they could build something meaningful, an environment where dignity and security harmoniously coexisted, where each person felt truly valued and safe. Danielle left her office, stepping into the terminal again, ready to continue guiding change, confident that today's turning point had set in motion something genuinely transformative, not merely for herself or Jason, but for every traveler and staff member whose lives intersected here in this vibrant crossroads of humanity. In the days following Danielle Carter's confrontation with Officer Jason Miller, a palpable tension settled over Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Word spread swiftly through staff corridors, coffee stations, and checkpoint lines. Everyone sensed that a significant shift was underway. Danielle understood the stakes were high, aware that every decision she made would ripple far beyond the walls of the airport. She spent late nights meticulously assembling evidence, records of Miller's biased interactions, personal testimonies from staff, security footage of troubling exchanges. As the hearing approached, Danielle carefully prepared her presentation, determined to be thorough and fair. Each document, each recorded incident, was more than mere evidence. They represented real lives affected, human dignity compromised. She took this responsibility profoundly to heart, knowing that justice was not just procedural, it was deeply personal. On the morning of the formal review, Danielle arrived early at the administrative conference room. She moved thoughtfully around the room, setting folders neatly upon the polished table, arranging chairs with quiet precision. The early sunlight slanted through large windows, illuminating her face as she paused to gather her thoughts. Today would mark a defining moment, not only in Jason Miller's career, but in the cultural fabric of airport security itself. Miller arrived shortly after, accompanied by his union representative. His demeanor was subdued, lacking the confident authority he typically projected. He glanced briefly at Danielle, meeting her eyes just long enough to reveal a complexity of emotions, fear, defiance, and beneath it all, a flicker of remorse. Danielle recognized this silently, acknowledging it with a subtle nod of respect. Even in this charged moment, she chose empathy over condemnation. The review board consisted of neutral arbitrators carefully selected from outside aviation agencies. Danielle began her presentation calmly, guiding them methodically through her evidence. Her voice was clear, steady, carrying quiet confidence that commanded attention. She described each incident without embellishment, allowing facts and documentation to speak. Her tone conveyed no bitterness or personal grievance, only an unwavering commitment to fairness and integrity. When it was Miller's turn, he stood hesitantly, voice initially uncertain. He spoke of his long service, highlighting his dedication and the complexity of maintaining vigilance in a high-pressure environment. At moments, emotion cracked through, his regret becoming subtly visible. Danielle observed quietly, listening intently to each word. She saw, perhaps for the first time, not simply a problematic officer, but a man struggling to reconcile personal biases with genuine intentions. The panel questioned Miller rigorously, probing beneath surface explanations, exposing the flaws in his justification. They asked why his recorded interventions disproportionately targeted minorities, challenging him to consider biases he'd long ignored. Miller's responses grew increasingly strained, his defenses weakening under scrutiny. The discomfort in the room intensified, yet Danielle remained calmly observant, unwilling to turn away from the difficult truths being confronted. As testimonies concluded, Danielle felt a surge of complex emotions, relief mixed with sadness, triumph intertwined with compassion. The panel adjourned to deliberate, leaving Danielle and Miller alone briefly in the empty conference room. Miller hesitated, then finally broke the silence, his voice quiet and humbled. "Miss Carter, Danielle," he began carefully, "I want you to know I never intended harm. I genuinely believed I was protecting people. But maybe I've misunderstood protection." Danielle met his gaze, compassion softening her eyes. "Officer Miller, real protection always involves fairness. When we overlook dignity, safety is compromised, not enhanced." Jason nodded slowly, absorbing her words. For the first time, Danielle saw true recognition dawning in him, a meaningful realization, however painful. She sensed an authentic moment of growth, knowing that accountability had opened a path toward redemption. Shortly after, the panel returned with their verdict. Officer Jason Miller was formally dismissed from his duties at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. While justified, the moment was solemn rather than triumphant. Danielle took no pleasure in Miller's downfall. Instead, she felt the weight of responsibility, understanding the profound impact of this decision. The days following the hearing became a period of reflection and profound change. Danielle leveraged the momentum, introducing robust new training sessions, emphasizing empathy, implicit bias recognition, and community engagement. Younger officers enthusiastically embraced the shift, expressing relief at clearer guidelines and open dialogue. Seasoned veterans initially hesitated, but gradually recognized the value in Danielle's vision, a security culture founded on mutual respect and transparent accountability. Months passed, and positive transformation gradually reshaped airport culture. Passenger satisfaction notably improved, complaint rates declined dramatically, and employees reported greater job satisfaction. Danielle's commitment to justice had fostered genuine, lasting change. Yet even amidst success, she often remembered Jason Miller, hoping he'd found clarity and purpose elsewhere. Real transformation, she knew, extended beyond institutional policy. It lay in personal growth, reconciliation, and healing. A year later, Danielle stood near the departures board where she and Miller had first encountered each other. She observed passengers bustling through terminals, security officers interacting warmly, respectfully. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Carter?" She turned to find Marcus Ellis, the young man Jason had unfairly interrogated, smiling warmly. "I wanted to say thank you," Marcus offered sincerely. "Your actions truly changed this place. I feel welcomed here now." Danielle smiled gently, deeply moved by his words. Moments like these affirmed the profound worth of her journey. Justice, after all, wasn't simply punitive. It restored dignity, confidence, and humanity itself. Returning to her office later that afternoon, Danielle reflected deeply upon the year's events. Her leadership had encountered obstacles, resistance, even animosity. But the challenges she'd navigated brought a profound realization. Meaningful change required courage, empathy, and persistent dedication. She understood now that behind every badge, every uniform, lay individuals capable of both harm and incredible growth. She hoped Jason Miller had found that capacity within himself too. In the quiet evening glow of her office, Danielle Carter recommitted herself to the guiding principles she'd championed from the beginning. Security must be equitable to be effective. This journey had taught her humility, patience, and the immense power of compassionate leadership. The airport now stood not merely as a place of transit, but as a vibrant reflection of justice's triumph over prejudice. Danielle knew the work would continue, as cultural transformation was never complete. Yet she felt immense gratitude for the chance to play a part in reshaping a critical institution. As twilight painted soft hues across the airport's horizon, she realized the true measure of justice wasn't solely in outcomes, but in lives positively changed, dignity restored, and in the profound belief that people, even flawed ones, could indeed evolve. With quiet confidence and enduring resolve, Danielle Carter rose from her desk, ready once more to lead, knowing justice was not simply an outcome. It was a daily practice, a relentless pursuit, and ultimately a profound act of love. Just when Danielle Carter believed the turbulence surrounding Officer Jason Miller's incident had subsided, the universe had one more test in store, a moment that would push her leadership and resilience beyond anything she'd faced before. It was a busy Friday afternoon at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the terminals alive with the bustling energy of thousands of weekend travelers. Danielle had spent the past weeks meticulously nurturing the seeds of a new security culture, advocating empathy, fairness, and accountability. For the first time since her arrival, it felt like genuine progress was being made. Staff morale had improved, passengers expressed appreciation, and even Jason Miller had quietly begun embracing the path toward redemption. But as she reviewed the afternoon security operations from her office, Danielle's radio crackled urgently, breaking her concentration. "Ms. Carter," came Officer Laura Simmons' voice, anxious yet controlled. "We have a developing situation at security checkpoint B14. I think you should come immediately." Danielle felt her heartbeat quicken slightly, though years of experience kept her composed. "On my way," she replied calmly, heading swiftly toward the checkpoint. Upon arrival, Danielle found a troubling scene unfolding rapidly. An elderly passenger, Mrs. Eleanor Grant, visibly distressed and confused, was arguing emotionally with officers who had pulled her aside for additional screening. A sizable crowd was forming, some passengers filming discreetly, sensing conflict and drama. Danielle quickly assessed the situation. This could easily spiral out of control if not handled immediately. She approached gently, speaking softly but authoritatively. "May I help here?" Officer Simmons stepped aside gratefully, whispering, "We tried explaining, but she's upset and disoriented." Danielle carefully introduced herself to Mrs. Grant, her voice warm, reassuring. "Ma'am, I'm Danielle Carter, head of security. Could you tell me what happened?" Mrs. Grant, visibly trembling, looked up at Danielle, tears pooling in her eyes. I don't know why they're stopping me. I did nothing wrong. I'm visiting my grandson. He's ill. I'm gonna miss my flight." Danielle immediately felt deep empathy. She glanced at her officers gently but firmly. "Let's give her some space, please." As the officer stepped back respectfully, Danielle knelt beside Mrs. Grant, quietly speaking words of reassurance. Her warmth visibly calmed the elderly woman. Yet, amid this peaceful moment, Danielle's phone buzzed urgently. Glancing quickly, she saw a security alert flash. A credible, anonymous threat had just been identified. A potential explosive device hidden in a passenger's luggage at the very checkpoint where they stood. Her pulse surged briefly, but Danielle knew she had to act decisively, swiftly, without alarming the crowd. Remaining calm, she stood, instructing Officer Simmons quietly, "Activate emergency protocols discreetly. Initiate immediate evacuation procedures for this section, calmly. Do not cause panic." Danielle gently took Mrs. Grant's hand, guiding her carefully toward the evacuation route. But as she did, Officer Simmons approached urgently again, face pale. "Ms. Carter, the bag, it's hers," Simmons whispered nervously. Danielle paused, her mind racing. Mrs. Grant? The gentle, frightened woman beside her, responsible for a potential threat? It seemed impossible. Danielle's instincts, honed over years of careful assessment, told her there must be more beneath the surface. Yet protocol demanded immediate action. Still, she hesitated momentarily, unwilling to surrender to blind suspicion. Danielle spoke softly to Mrs. Grant, carefully choosing her words. "Ma'am, could there be something unusual in your luggage?" Mrs. Grant shook her head emphatically, tears returning. "No, dear, just my medications, some clothes, maybe gifts for my grandson." "Nothing dangerous." Danielle felt tension tighten around her heart. She had mere moments to make a decision, follow strict procedure, detain and interrogate Mrs. Grant immediately, or trust the deeper instincts she'd cultivated so carefully, risking potential disaster. "Officer Simmons," Danielle instructed firmly, "I need immediate verification from surveillance. Retrieve security footage showing who handled Mrs. Grant's bag before screening. Hurry." Seconds felt endless as officers scrambled. Crowds murmured uneasily, sensing trouble beneath the outward calm. Mrs. Grant watched fearfully, clearly aware something serious was unfolding. Danielle held her hand reassuringly, her own heart racing, aware this single moment could undo everything she'd fought so diligently to build: trust, fairness, humanity. Finally, footage arrived swiftly to Danielle's phone. She reviewed urgently, noticing a critical detail. Just moments before Mrs. Grant checked her bag, an unidentified younger man in a dark hoodie had approached briefly, covertly slipping something small into the suitcase's outer pocket unnoticed. Danielle exhaled sharply, feeling relief mixed with determination. Mrs. Grant was innocent. She'd nearly become a victim, a pawn in someone else's sinister plan. Without hesitation, Danielle issued rapid commands. "Identify and locate the suspect immediately. Alert airport police and security teams. Clear all surrounding areas until we ensure safety." Officers sprang into swift, coordinated action, confidence restored by Danielle's calm yet decisive leadership. Within minutes, the suspect, a man later identified as Robert Nash, known to authorities, was apprehended without resistance near the airport exit. His intentions, though unclear, had evidently targeted chaos, fear, or worse. Danielle personally reassured Mrs. Grant again, gently explaining what had transpired. Overcome with gratitude, the elderly woman embraced Danielle tearfully, whispering heartfelt thanks for believing her innocence. Danielle, moved profoundly, recognized anew the importance of the principles she'd advocated: empathy combined with vigilance, humanity allied with security. As news spread of Danielle's handling of the crisis, respect and admiration for her leadership surged throughout the airport community. Passengers and employees alike praised her measured judgment, compassion, and unwavering courage under pressure. Even Jason Miller, observing quietly from afar, felt profoundly inspired. Danielle's example reaffirmed the deep changes he aspired toward himself. In the following days, Danielle reflected deeply upon the incident. She recognized it as more than just an emergency narrowly avoided. It was an ultimate validation of the culture she'd worked tirelessly to instill. Security could indeed coexist harmoniously with compassion, fairness, and trust. Yet she also saw clearly the fragile nature of this balance, knowing vigilance and continuous learning were vital. Danielle committed herself anew to guiding this balance thoughtfully, passionately, understanding fully how leadership shaped countless lives beyond her own. One afternoon soon after, Danielle received a visitor to her office, Jason Miller himself, now humble and sincere. He extended his hand respectfully, expressing earnest gratitude for her courageous example. You showed me something important, Jason acknowledged softly. Real leadership means empathy under pressure, fairness even amid chaos. Thank you, Danielle, truly. Danielle smiled warmly, sensing genuine transformation in him. It's never easy, Jason, she responded gently, but it matters deeply. Together, their handshake symbolized more than reconciliation. It embodied the powerful potential for growth, redemption, and meaningful change within each individual. Later, Danielle stood quietly again near the departures board, watching streams of passengers move gracefully through the airport. The terminal buzzed gently with renewed energy, optimism palpable. Her heart filled with quiet pride, not merely for navigating crisis, but for fostering lasting transformation through empathy, courage, and unwavering fairness. Turning toward her office once more, Danielle paused briefly, noticing Marcus Ellis approaching again, this time smiling warmly, accompanied by his family. Marcus embraced Danielle gratefully, expressing admiration for her inspiring leadership. You're making a difference, he affirmed earnestly. For me, for everyone. Danielle felt deeply moved, grateful beyond words. Moments like these reaffirmed the profound significance of her mission. Change wasn't merely possible, it was happening, quietly powerful, shaped one person, one moment at a time. If this powerful story of courage, compassion, and meaningful leadership resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support fuels our passion, enabling us to create more inspiring content and continue sharing impactful stories that remind us all of our shared humanity. Click subscribe, and together, let's continue the journey toward empathy, fairness, and genuine transformation.